Hey everyone, this is Joey Thurmond from Push Square, and I've been playing Call of Duty since Infinity Ward's first effort in 2003. So I've not only been through the ringer with every single title, but also the changing desires of its fanbase. I remember clamoring for innovation around the time of Black Ops, and seeing commendable signs of that with its sequel. However, there's a dangerous balancing act with evolving a series where you can make too little changes, or too many to the point where it becomes unrecognizable. I'd say that started with Advanced Warfare for me. And when I didn't even bother playing Infinite Warfare's multiplayer a week after launch, because I hated it so much, I knew things had gone too far. That's why Sledgehammer Games' Call of Duty World War II has held so much promise for me by getting back to basics with its classic FPS setting, not seen since Treyarch's World at War. But does this game feel right as Rhine? Or does it fail to advance the series forward? Let's dig in this game's trenches and see what it has to offer. Many of the recent Call of Duties have been obsessed with adding more mechanics and abilities to further innovation. This can definitely be seen in the likes of Black Ops 3, Infinite Warfare, Advanced Warfare, because you have exoskeletons and cybernetic enhancements that give you a whole bunch of different things you can do in combat. But in the process of doing that, with boosting, enhanced sliding, double jumping, all this extra stuff, it really gets away from the classic gameplay where you're kind of limited and weak in terms of how much you can do in combat. And that's what Call of Duty World War II seeks to emphasize this time around by, going back to World War II. And I really think that's evident from the first mission. You're storming the beaches of Normandy, and there's only so much you can do as you advance toward the machine gun nests. It's really visceral. There's gore and chaos all around you, and you really have to take a slow approach in order to make your way up to the machine gun nests and infiltrate the trenches. This isn't a game where you're jumping all around and using all this stuff to advance. You have to really take your time because you actually don't regenerate health. You have to pick up health packs. You have to change to different weapons because you can't pick up ammo. It really adopts a slower pace for the series, and I really like that because there isn't all of this extra fluff and movement in the way of the gunplay, which takes priority here. But that doesn't mean there isn't anything new to report. What's cool is that you'll have about 5 to 6 squad mates at the most in some missions, and all of them have specific functions in your team. For example, this guy named Zussman, who is one of your character's best pals, can toss you health packs after a certain amount of time has passed. And another character named Pearson can actually call out enemies, which highlights them in white. And there's another guy that gives you grenades. There's another one that tosses you red smoke signals to bring in artillery strikes. It's a pretty cool idea. It's a lot like how Elizabeth functions in BioShock Infinite. But if I'm being honest, it really doesn't go beyond that. And a lot of the abilities just seem to have characters attached to them for the sake of giving the abilities faces, you could say. And that really ties into the story itself. These are sort of relevant examples. When you think of stuff like Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, Fury, you get to know every single squad member that's a part of a platoon. Like, some of them might not receive as much screen time or dialogue, but they all feel important in some way, and you feel different degrees of emotional loss when they die or they're injured. But with the exception of 2 or 3 characters, and one of them includes yourself, you really don't see a lot of good character development for the cast and camaraderie, even. Half of the squad is just kind of there, and you never even really get their names or understand what they're about. And I find them almost pointless and just shoehorned into the story to kind of get this Band of Brothers feel when in fact the story doesn't really nail that at all. If anything, the story feels cookie cutter with its premise and the evolution of its story. Again, the only part where things get really interesting, both from a storyline and gameplay perspective, is with the French resistance part, but that's only for 2 missions, and it's the only part of the game that really piqued my interest and showed me what it could be capable of outside of the usual type of levels and enemy encounters that we've already seen before in past Call of Duties and other games. I say all that and it sounds so negative, but really it comes from the fact that the game just feels fine and safe. I feel like a lot more could have been done with the levels and story to make World War II stand out. But in the end, it just feels okay. And there's nothing really wrong with that. It's just a bit disappointing given how passionate and historically accurate the team was trying to be with this game, which it does succeed in doing. It's just that the campaign isn't as emotionally gripping with its gameplay or story as it could be. But who cares about campaigns these days? Everyone cares about multiplayer, especially no-scoping and teabagging your friends on the grim, hollowed battlefields of World War II, especially to open loot boxes on the bloody beaches of Normandy, boy! Epic! But, you know, besides that, is the multiplayer overall good? Yes. And no. Allow me to explain. Like the campaign, the multiplayer decides to trim things back a bit with its features and systems. And one of the places this is most noteworthy, besides, you know, the actual gameplay itself, is the create a class system. No longer do you have the pick 10 system of the past few games. You actually have, you know, pretty standard classes that you have to abide by. However, the biggest change comes in the form of divisions, which are these roles, basically, you can assign to classes that fit specific types of primary weapons that you're using. So if you like using shotguns, it's a no-brainer for you to choose the Expeditionary class, which actually gives you exclusive abilities like incendiary shells, being immune to tactical equipment, and receiving less damage from explosives. You can't get any of these perks and attachments outside of this division. So if you want to take less explosive damage as a submachine gunner, you're out of luck. You're going to have to forego the advantage of getting incendiary shells to get that perk that you specifically want with another type of weapon. So you're encouraged to stick with general roles by going with the division that fits whatever primary weapon you're using. And it's a really interesting way to shake up, you know, perks and attachments and all that stuff, but ultimately it doesn't really impact how you approach the game itself. It's just a different way to go about customization and perks and weapons and so forth that keeps things a little bit interesting. And by gosh, Sledgehammer Games definitely stressed how this headquarters, a social hub, is going to be a big part of the game, but it's really vapid. The only stuff you can do there is go to this R&R place where you can play Atari games, which is admittedly cool, but it's more of a novelty. You can go to the shooting range, go to the quartermaster to unlock camos, calling cards, and whatnot. You can accept challenges from General Howard, I think his name is, but other than that, there's really nothing to do there. And as I mentioned earlier, there are loot boxes in the game. They're called supply drops, but they're just for the camos and calling cards and emotes you can get. It's just cosmetic. And really the only thing that kind of gives you a little bit of a boost is some of the camos, which give you extra experience points, but the advantage you get is so minimal and it doesn't impact the actual gameplay, so it's not really anything to fuss over. Once you get into the game, you have your usual fare of modes, except for one, which is called War. And it's probably one of the best modes that's happened to Call of Duty in a while, because it's like a whole bunch of objectives thrown into these uniquely designed maps that has one team trying to push deeper into the enemy's territory and completing different sets of objectives. It can really result in some tense, dramatic matches where One moment you're trying to plant a bomb like in Sabotage, or you're escorting a tank to a certain objective like in Overwatch's payload mode. It's some great stuff, and really, like, the overall feel of the multiplayer is sort of like World at War, but beefed up and polished for modern times. The only issues I have with the game, though, are technical ones. There's a lot of stuttering during matches, and I think that has to do with the servers at the moment. They've been particularly bad for this launch, and there's a lot of stuttering, enemies teleporting everywhere, and one of the biggest problems that people have with the game right now is hit scan. You'll be getting a lot of hit markers, more than you have in past games, and you'll swear you might have shot someone, and you can prove it with footage, but the bullets don't connect in this game as well as in past games. So Sledgehammer Games has their work laid out for them at the moment. And lastly, I'll be brief, the new Zombies mode. It comes with the map, the Final Reich, and it takes place in this abandoned town where you're playing as these 4 characters that uncover this conspiracy where this Nazi scientist is trying to make weapons of war with reanimating dead bodies, of course, you know, typical arcane stuff those Nazis are up to. And yeah, Sledgehammer Games has a really good grasp of designing horrifying enemies. The zombies do look terrifying, and there's a good diversity of them to mix up survival. The environment itself is really diverse as well in regard to where you can go and what you find, and it's all super, super detailed. There's not much different in terms of mixing up the zombies formula. You still technically have Perks-a-Cola, weapons on the wall, the mystery box, they just have different names. I'd say the only major change comes in the form of this zombies mode being way more objective-oriented. And this does make some things between rounds really interesting, such as escorting this artifact to a certain spot while you're trying to kill zombies all around it to charge it with this energy. Like, it can really stress you out, and that's exciting. But if you're into the more holding up a place and surviving like I am with the classic zombies maps that Treyarch did, you're gonna be kind of disappointed, I guess, with this. But, I mean, on its own, a lot of people like it, and I have no reason to think that people who like this style of Nazi zombies are going to complain. It's pretty great for what it is, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Sledgehammer Games does with it. And finally, that's all I have to say about Call of Duty World War II. You can check out my final conclusions and score over on pushsquare.com in the full review, and if you happen to enjoy this video, go ahead and smash that like button if you're so obliged, and subscribe to the channel. It'll make my overlord editor, Sammy Barker, a very happy man. Be sure to let us know what you think about this review and the game itself in the comments below, and with that, I'll see you all later. Thanks for watching.
Holy shit! Did that just happen? Can't believe we made it. That's one for the books.